Yeah. Hello and welcome to the fifth and final panel of the second Writers Guild of Great Britain Festival of Game Writing. The panel tonight is implementing game narrative, taking the words and making them magic. Tonight's panel has been organised and hosted by the Writers Guild of Great Britain, which is a TUC-affiliated union that represents writers working in all sorts of media, from film through television, radio, musical theatre, theatre animation, children's writing, books, and of course, video games. And we are here to offer you advice, contract vetting, events, and we of course publish the Writers Guild of Great Britain's video games guidelines. And as I've probably said to you a few times now, we have the new version of that coming out in a few months based upon the survey that we ran last year. So that will be coming out with a lot of updated information, potential brackets of pay, etc. that will be in there. Also to remind everybody, with us being a TUC-affiliated union, we will of course be celebrating the fact that tomorrow is the International Day of Workers. And if you are working in an industry, that means you are a worker. Don't let people sort of persuade you otherwise. And being a worker comes with a whole lot of rights as well as responsibilities, and your employers have responsibilities as well that they need to look after you. So make sure that you're aware of those so you can protect yourself and your fellow workers. My name's Andrew Walsh. I'm the co-chair of the Writers Guild of Great Britain Video Games Committee. I'm also a freelance writer, and I mention that because the Writers Guild is made up of a mixture of full-time staff, Kate, you've already met, and volunteers. So if you join the guilds, you can also become an active member, joining the committees and helping us decide what we should be doing to help writers across the industry, and also helping out with these events. So please do consider joining us. We couldn't have made tonight happen without our sponsors, Artisy Software. They've also sponsored all of the other panels this week, so thank you very much to them for their gracious support. Please note that chat's off, but you can still send us polite questions that we can respond to in the Q&A. And I think that's it. So you're stuck with me again as a chair tonight. I'm sorry, but that should make this part of it seamless. But we do have some excellent panelists here today who will do a much better job of introducing themselves than I could. So I'm going to pass you across now at the start of this event so that each of our panelists can say hello and introduce themselves. Over to you.
I'll go first. I'm Frankie. I work for Fusebox Games, I'm the lead narrative designer on Love Island. We're on our 4th season, releasing soon, hopefully. And yes, that's me.
And I am going to do it to you, Frankie. Sorry, I'm going to underline the lead because you still made that too quiet. Because if anybody who heard Frankie speak last year, you might notice that change in title. So congratulations on that one.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. No, yeah, it's a good privilege. It's a big privilege. Yeah, thank you. I'll pass to Leia.
I am Leia Mwanga Maguire. I am senior narrative designer at Fusebox. So Frankie's my boss. And I work on Love Island as well. And I don't know, I'm just really happy about Frankie being made to recognize her greatness that I can't remember what the rest of the intro is supposed to be, but I work at Fusebox. I'm a senior narrative designer. I will pass over to Kike.
So, hi everyone, my name is Kike. I'm pretty fresh. I've been in the industry for just over a year now, and I'm currently working at Twin Drums as a writer on the 5th edition setting and video game, The Wagadu Chronicles. Yeah, and yeah, that's me, I believe.
Thank you very much. So through the week, what we've tried to do is look at a variety of different subjects involving game narrative, some of which are about the craft, some of which are about the industry, some of them are more theoretical. And when we were talking over subjects, we kept coming back to the fact that one of the things that hardly gets talked about at all is implementation, and the step that once words have been scribbled down on a page, what happens to them next? So that's what we're sort of covering today. And immediately what I'd like to do is go off on a tangent Before we get just to implementation, I know this is a related question, but just to help some people that might not understand the term, everybody has put themselves down as a narrative designer. So could you give me just some thoughts on what a narrative designer is, what a narrative designer does? Because some of the things we're going to be talking about today involve that title, and I know it's one that causes a lot of confusion for people as we go through. So I'll pass that over. Who would like to tackle that?
I could perhaps start. I mean, I have the least experience on this. And actually, I'm technically a writer, but I think I kind of wear both hats since our company is quite small. So as a writer, I believe, because I had this issue as well when I was first coming in. So this is just my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But the writer's kind of more on the content side, like what's actually being written, the dialogue, all of this kind of thing. And my idea of a narrative designer is the person that maybe might do some writing, I guess, as well, depending on the company, but actually determines what part of the game the narrative goes into, and kind of, I guess, has an overview of, the narrative and where it slots in. Yeah, so that's my take.
Yeah, definitely in agreement with that. I think it really does come down as well to the studio that you're working in. Depends on kind of like if it's a very heavily sort of narrative based game like Love Island. We have a lot of narrative designers, because there's a lot of branching, there's a lot of logic, and there's a lot of different ways the player can explore. And for context, Love Island, the game, you play as a character going into the villa, and you can date people. You find love in the villa out of 10 other islanders. So you can date like a numerous amount of people. And so you can end up with a numerous amount of people. So there's lots of different endings. So kind of getting to those endings, I feel like is a big job of the narrative designer, kind of plotting out those different routes. That's definitely a significant role.
Yeah, and alongside the endings, there's also, I think the point for us, and generally in games, is the way that one feels one has agency as a player is that your choices have consequences. In our interactive fiction, the job of a narrative designer is to make sure on a micro scale, so in our, if for other people it might be levels, but for us it's in episodes or releases, that you'll make a decision and it'll careen you off in one direction or another, and the way that narrative engages with that is, or the narrative aspect of that is like the emotional effect that you'll have on the other players, because obviously Love Island is very much about interpersonal dynamics, both platonic ones and romantic and physical ones as well. The things that you choose to do will have an effect, and as narrative designers we're like trying to look on a holistic level, as Frankie was saying, how do you get from beginning to end and like have various possible endings and end game, but then also on a smaller scale, how can you make it feel as if cumulatively the little decisions that you're making are creating a sense of you as a person in our world. So yeah, and with regards to the writing, I think it is a bit different in that, our studio, in that it's more of an experience thing at the moment, so that you wouldn't have the our writers do come into our lessons, and so it's almost like a writer's room, understanding where the pieces go. Writers do get involved in that, but they wouldn't have the responsibility of understanding, like, okay, well, what logic can we use here, what will this mean, all that kind of stuff. They wouldn't have that yet. But as you become more senior, you do. And actually, as you become more senior, the less writing you do. But yeah.
That's great, because we talked a lot about narrative design in the procedural generation panel last night, and that was much more about systems design and blue sky thinking for trying to match those up, which you're doing within the process as well. So it's just, I think, aligning the fact that within the industry it can cover the systems design you're talking about, but also the implementation, and it's a term which can mean multiple things, would you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. Many things. That's why it's so confusing.
It is. It's frustrating as well as wordsmiths. Like for us, words mean things, but they don't. Well, rather, even though everyone's speaking English, particularly in the gaming industry, I think people's understanding of words means that you could be having a whole conversation where it's like you just don't see. So just as long as you've established like what's behind that word, what is it that you actually do, and what's your expectation of me, and what do you need from me, then you're all right. But yeah, words are slippery.
And as words are slippery, is it something that in terms of the implementation or the narrative design side of it, do you need to be a writer? Do you need a writing background, or can you come at it with a technical background, or what is everyone's background? What drew you into the narrative design and implementation side of it, and how do you find that with other people who are in the sort of similar roles?
Kike, you go first.
Okay, so I basically started off as a product owner, so managing a product, writing specifications and all of this kind of thing. I didn't have any prior professional experience with writing. I mean, I did write for myself and I enjoyed doing that, and I read, but I mean, I don't have any prior experience. I think the most important thing is, I mean, you don't need to be an actor, you don't need to be a director, you don't need to have any kind of writing experience, but I think it's very important to try as best as you can to, number one, consume the kind of content that you would like to create yourself. So seeing how other people have implemented narrative in games. I mean, also even just reading or watching films, and also being mindful to your own personal reaction to things that you consume as well. So, and then trying to implement that. I do think it is also quite helpful to do some research on the tools that you can kind of use. So for example, one program I heard quite a lot about when I was starting is Twine, which kind of gives you a really good idea of how to sort of structure interactive storytelling, the different options that you can have, the different types of flow. So yeah, to answer the question, you don't need necessarily professional experience, but it is good to be intentional in entering the industry and kind of just trying to learn as much as you can. So yeah, that's, I think, my take on that question.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with that. Being a consumer of what you want to create is going to be the best kind of experience that you can give yourself to sort of prepare yourself for what you want to make. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Your background, Frankie.
Oh, background, sorry. My background is I did study English and creative writing at university. I went into it because it was the one thing I could sort of do. Wasn't good at maths, wasn't good at science, wasn't good at any of that. So I went into it, hoping to sort of kind of grow a little bit as a person. And that's how I found Fusebox, was during my time at London South Bank. And I sort of applied as an intern, was making little graphs, was making the chairs in the office, all that good stuff. And yes, so for me, having the writing experience of having the degree, kind of, it didn't necessarily help in the sense that it put me in the right place at the right time. London South Bank was where Fusebox's office was based. So that was, very, very fortunate. But I don't believe you can't go kind of into this and you can't sort of like learn from it. If you consume stories and if you enjoy storytelling, and you have an aptitude for creating that narrative of stories, then I feel like you're definitely on your way to being able to do it.
Yeah, I sorry, could you, I love the way I was like, Frankie, in the background. Could you just repeat the question? So what are the two parts of the question? Or did you just take a sip? I'm sorry.
That was perfect timing. You got me as well.
That's my job. I'm sorry. But yeah, just to make sure I get both sides. Could you repeat it?
It's just looking at in terms of narrative design and the implementation side of it. Do you need to be a writer, and what sort of attracted you into the role?
Okay, so from the implementation side of it, I think we're at Fusebox. We have like game designers who implement, and they're not necessarily writers, and they're more about systems and the structure of it, and actually they do express themselves creatively because we do a lot with art and music and camera movements and stuff, and so it's a really, there is a way that they make the narrative come alive that lends itself to that skill set. But it's like, if anyone who loves creating stories, not necessarily just through words, would probably be a very good implementer. It's just, the juxtaposition of features and music and whatever in order to create emotion. If you like that, you can definitely become one. More on the narrative designer side, again, I don't know that one necessarily needs to have a degree in writing or anything like that. I think it's just you wanting to tell stories, specifically when it comes to interactive fiction or games in general. You also have to additionally want to allow someone to have agency in your story, so they are not just a passive consumer of it in terms of like a television or a show or a play or whatever. You should want to give someone else room to live and inhabit the world that you create. And so it's a slightly different way of thinking about storytelling, but it's just something to bear in mind. I did classics at university. I did Latin and Greek, and then I took a very long and winding road to get here, in which I really changed careers. And so what I would say, similar to Frankie, is if there's stuff that you consume that you're like, oh, how does this work? Like, why did I like that? Really dissecting it and then trying to make your own. Oddly, the other panelists have said, could be a consumer of what you want to make. I find a lot of what I want to play doesn't yet exist, or doesn't exist in a way that I can easily access. Very excited about Wagadu Chronicles.
Thanks.
But I'm so excited by that in terms of the opportunity that there are so many more stories to tell. And then I'm not sure what your platform is, Kike, I apologize, but certainly in mobile games, there's so much room and potential. So like everyone on the call, like, be really excited, because there's such a democratization of the industry because of just the power that mobile phones have now and what you're able to create. So there'll be opportunities, so just prepare yourself for them.
Great stuff, yeah. And I think you alluded there to the fact that some of the implementation is done by designers, and I know when I arrive on a project, trying to find out how any particular company does something is one of the first things that I want to do, because it's like, oh no, the audio is not implemented by the audio team, it's done by John, who sits in the shed outside. Why?
John.
Yes, it can be quite a labyrinthine process unraveling who does what. So we've gone with the sort of warm introduction. It's good to know where everyone's come from, and wherever your approach is, you don't need to be afraid of it, because the technical side can be a little bit terrifying. And I know when I approached it, I did a law degree, and then sort of flounced around in the theatre for a while. So when I came around and was dealing with coding, it was like, I've got to do maths. What? And I've fallen in love with that side of things, which is really weird. But it's approaching it from different directions is fine. Bringing it back to a proper question, we've talked about how you've approached it. We've talked about the fact that game designers can be involved in implementation. So what would you say the skill set is for someone once they've begun to get established in the implementation side of it? What are the types of skills that are useful to bring into the job?
I think resourceful is a really good one. Being able to be resourceful with the kind of, because as a narrative designer, especially if you're working in a game that's very narrative heavy, your decisions, your kind of stories, they'll have implications on every single other team, department that you're working with. And being able to kind of like be mindful of that, and realize that if you say that the sky is green here, but then the sky is yellow over here, then I've got to change colour. So I think that's a really nice kind of quality to have, resourcefulness, and it's definitely something that you learn kind of as you go, to sort of just see where you can save on things, and yeah, that's one of the ones I like to see anyway.
I would say off the back of that, seeing where you can save stuff, it would be like somebody who really likes to be creative within limitations, because you should be excited about, okay, I've only got this number of expressions and I've only got, I can only do so much. How can I take this script? This is on the side of the implementation side. Like, how can I take this script and elevate it, but within very clear, a very clear bucket with regards to complexity, with regards to all different kinds of things. So it is, sorry, when you start a sentence and then you're like, you literally haven't told those people that, so don't say it. I was going to say it's like problem solving, which is how I think about coding, which I was reading my daughter yesterday a book on coding for girls, and they were like, fundamentally, they were trying to explain it, they were like, fundamentally coding is just problem solving. I would say similarly, implementation is problem solving. It's okay, you've only got, this is your toolbox, this is what we're trying to achieve, like how can you be super as Frankie said, resourceful. So I just add creative to that, and very, very collaborative, very just communicate, someone who likes to communicate, likes to solve problems, and in the most creative ways possible. That was a very stumbly.
It was great.
Segment.
It was really good. I think, and I'm gonna get hate mail when I say this now. I think a lot of people sort of regularly see implementation as like dot to dot sort of process. So I'm not going to get a whole thing on Twitter, people saying like, you don't understand the art of dot to dot, and I don't. So there's the artistic side. I apologise for insulting any dot to dot elements, but it's often seen as implementation seen as a sort of just fill in the line between these 2 points. And you've been talking a lot about the creative aspects of it, which I think are generally forgotten. We talk about the skill of the film editor, we talk about the skill of the audio editor, but implementation in games is still very much, I think, viewed by many as it's a bit like pressing a button. You just go and stick it in the game. So that talking about it as a creative process is vital, I think, for people to really understand where it starts. So with that in mind, who do you work with to implement? What can you give us, without blowing any trade secrets? Can you sort of take us through sort of some of the procedural things that you have to do when you're implementing? Are the ideas coming from design? Are they coming from the writers? Are they coming from you? And then how are you actually getting from a concept of, wouldn't it be great if John said this to this character in a meeting, to actually being in the game and occurring? Who are you talking to, and what's the general processing?
I can say from my point of view, I'm pretty much talking to everyone I can. So I'm totally behind the idea of the role being quite collaborative. So for example, we're working on our islands, our maps, and there are kind of points of interest that we're trying to implement. And a lot of that will maybe have, or not maybe, it will definitely have some lore behind that. So there's a lot of interaction with level design to kind of see if we can kind of feed off of each other. So if there's something that I think is a very good idea, I could pass this on to level design. They could maybe move something around, or they could also give me some advice. I guess if narrative is connected to interactions, that would be a conversation with tech. When is this text triggered, for example? What do I need to do? And then I would kind of think, okay, how can I make this text interesting? How can I make it feel natural to the player as they're experiencing the game? There's also a lot of back and forth with the art team. So I'm looking up a lot of different cultural aspects, like how do people dress? How do people look? What kind of cultures do we have in the game? And this is really a constant back and forth. We're kind of exchanging quite a lot of ideas. So it's not really just a one-way thing. It's really just everyone's communicating with everyone, and we're feeding off of the different information that we're kind of receiving to create a really nice and immersive experience, basically. So everyone.
I think that's definitely right. It's the same, sort of similar with Love Island. It does come down to, you know, you're making a game. You're not making a book. It's not just words. You need the art. You need the game design. You need the sound. You need the engineering. You need the you need the QA to test it. You need to make sure you're not, you know, bringing too much into it. So when it comes to QA, like down the line there, it's not going to be too long. So yeah, it's really important to just be in sync with each other.
Yeah. Sorry, continuing on my mission of tooting Frankie's horn. She, as I think that's the amazing thing, is having her as lead, and the way that our company has grown organically is that she's literally done every single job and understands why producers would get upset about this thing, or how it would affect QA if you were to be like, I'll just change this little thing, or have this many potential end states. When you know all of those, you understand, you don't necessarily have to, you know, be an expert in it, but understand each of those roles, then collaborating with them is better, even from the script stage. So when you're writing the script, you can imagine in your head, oh, like for example, today in a storylining session, we're writing a scene, and we're like, okay, let's go look at the story, the art's done, the backgrounds, let's look at which is the best background to use. And then our artists are amazing. I'm so excited for people to see season 4, but it's super detailed and amazing. So we're writing details into the script that make it feel immersive in the narrative, but then we're also thinking about, okay, when we hand it over to design and they're implementing it, and they're able to pan or focus or whatever, what will we let them know? And then when we're thinking about audio, if, you know, are there any sound effects that we could get in that would make you feel more situated in that area? So it's both a waterfall process and going from script to ship, but it's also what's this, like a tentacle, like a spider web? I don't know, it goes out as well. I don't know what geographical topographical metaphor one would use, but the point is, it's you know, you both hand stuff over, but you're always talking, always communicating with people. But like I said, I think one of the best things that I imagine most of the audience here is thinking about getting in. So again, I would really point to the way that Frankie did it, which is, don't worry so much about where you come in. Just embrace whatever it is that you're doing, because later down the line, when you get to write, it'll be so beneficial that you understand what you're asking other people to do. So yeah, I would just say that. And yeah, Frank, I will. I'm stopping. She's just so amazing because she's like done it really well.
The love that there's been this week between people has been brilliant. It is, please, everyone out there, continue to make the narrative the happy, supportive community it is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing of it is, one ought to shout out as well in our, we've been super fortunate in our company that there's a lot, you're allowed to be vulnerable and ask for help. You were saying before about feeling intimidated by, you know, what sort of computer science MA do I have to do, whatever, that you don't need that. You just need to have a somewhat analytical mind, a somewhat desire to see how things fit together. And one probably has that because when you're putting together a story, you probably already have that. This is just additionally like essentially playing God. You can make people go in different places. But what you want to do is surround yourself with people who you're not scared of asking questions from, if it's virtually or if you're fortunate enough to find a company that is supportive. But yeah, just always, you know, have the humility to ask questions and dig in stuff. So last thing, but I will also say about the implementation and the idea that it's dot to dot. I think, again, it's the attitude that you take to that job, because a very a non-lateral mind will be like, there's one straight line to get from dot to dot, but you can be like, well, if I go here and I go around, you'll get from one dot to the other, but you've put something of yourself into it. So no job is, you know, boring. It's just what's the attitude you're going to take to it, and how is it actually going to help you to get to where you want in terms of writing.
Yeah.
Okay. You can take the dots and turn them into crotchets and minions. And
you can.
I'm going to use another sort of music reference, because if everybody's learned this week, I'm just an expert when it comes to why I keep. But yes, if anybody says, I always say, like, one of the things you say, if you say "I'll just," you need to just. The thing "I'll just" means is I'll just go outside, slap myself in the face until I realise "I'll just" means no. It's never that easy. It's never that easy. So whenever you catch yourself, I do it to myself. Whenever you hear yourself say that, understand there's the web out there, and I think. Implementation is collaboration, even when you're doing it yourself for your own project, because that's the bit where you need to have all the voices of all the departments going on in your own head. And we've had a very quick question about, could you please say the name of the book again? We've had several requests so that people can let their daughters learn about coding as well. So
oh God, hold on. Do you know what? I took a photo of it. Do you know, I think I sent it to Frankie.
We've got the rest.
Hold on, I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat.
Starting from a writing perspective, because a lot of the people that are here today obviously are here from the writing side of things, and have learned to format a script in a particular way and to set about things. Oh, hello.
Girls Who Code.
Brilliant.
That's my daughter holding the book, Girls Who Code, but I'll put it in the
so what are some common mistakes that writers make when writing and formatting interactive scripts from an implementation point of view? What's the information that needs to be added? What are the common mistakes that are assumptions that writers make when they set out creating a script? And you either get an idea or you get a piece of paper and you go, oh, thanks. So what can writers be doing to help the process?
Oh, I have one that comes straight to mind. I am queen sometimes. Sometimes it's literally 0 words, but other times it's like paragraphs, like just writing too much, doing too much. I think that's I guess it's an instinct of a writer. You kind of like want to throw everything in there. You want some lore, you want some instructions, well, the instructions that are meant to be there. You want a joke. And I have personally seen, like, from playing games myself and watching other people play games, a lot of people, either once they see kind of a block of text, they kind of, they don't really want to read it. So I think kind of offsetting this, or trying to find kind of a nice middle ground between having text that's quite rich or witty or full of lore, and something that's also quite on the nose, for lack of a better term, is something that writers should be mindful of, I suppose. That's my thing. Yeah, I've been told so many times, can you, like, please cut down your text? This dialogue is way too long. That's a really long ouch, so just stop. Yeah, so that's me.
It's is a really good point as well, because it's so different when you're writing on, you know, Google Docs or wherever, and you're like, well, this just looks like a nice amount of text, and then when it comes into your platform and whatever text box you've got, and it's tiny. I've been there, definitely been there as well. Yeah, I think another one, definitely something that I've done in the past as well. I think it's kind of off the back of my last point, is just being sort of observant of, in particular, the kind of impact that sort of what you describe is then not always what you see. Trying to sync up there is a really kind of tricky one. It's usually not a mistake of either or. Sometimes things come later down in the process, and what was kind of written in a script or was drawn there has changed. Things change all the time. So it's just kind of making sure that things kind of sort of match up visually is a really good thing to keep in mind, because yeah, it's a great kind of privilege for writers to be able to write something and to know that it's going to be seen kind of actually in game, and likewise as well, kind of just being kind of, if you've got a sort of scene direction in mind, you know, if you sort of letting the game designers know kind of where you want this to go. I think it's what you said earlier, Leia, about panning to the left, panning to the right. If you want to sort of do that, if that's something that you know, just communicating that as well, kind of in your script is very useful. Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, so looking from a lot of the people that are approaching the evening day from the writing side of things. So it's thinking about what information it's useful to include in a script, or what information it's useful to leave out in a script, because a lot of people have been taught to present information in a television or a theatre or a film format. What's the type of thing that needs to be added to help the implementation process?
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's less about what the player will see, but more about what does the blueprint of the script need to look like for the implementers to get what it is that you're going for. Yeah, I think it's pretty much what the other two have said is probably actually likely outside of what's on the script, because ours are quite sparse. It's very much, you know, there's the logic in there and stuff, but it's in terms of visually what you'll see, one probably has to discuss that with the implementers outside of the script a little bit, but also it's quite valuable as well for them to have sight of outlines, or just a sense of where the story is going and what you're trying to achieve, because yeah, it's sometimes you think you've conveyed it in the script, what it is that you're trying to achieve, but it's not. It is quite an economical document, certainly our scripts, so you possibly have to be clear if there's other stuff that you need.
So, I mean, what sort of additional documents do you tend to use? Can I ask you what formats you tend to work in for the writers to work in, and then for presenting things, and what type of documents assist the process?
So so we've recently started using an in-house tool, which is kind of helping us with the implementations. The writers are working in a kind of a tool that sort of you write in a little text box, and then you can join it onto the next line of dialogue, and that's kind of something that we're working with now, which has been really great. Previously we used Google Docs, and we're just formatting everything kind of in that, and then the game designers would take that and bring it into the engine, so that's kind of brings a whole sort of host of different ways of working. Really it is kind of down to the studio that you're in. Every single studio will be very different.
Yeah. Also, I mean, in terms of communicating what it is that we need or what will go where, it is, I mean, there's a script that's in our proprietary software, but then there's also Excel sheets of describing why is that choice there and what's it doing, that, you know, explaining the logic that we're using there. And then there'll be like art requests, and okay, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is we also use Miro for like
yes.
what should call it, love a bit of Miro, for mood boarding and stuff, so visually so it's like, I'd say I mean, if you can think of a way of communicating on a screen, we probably are using it in order to convey what it is that we need. And there's also, you know, your good old Slack to be like, what are you trying to do here? And the other person's like, wow. So it's aside from the script, actually, to get to, you know, shipping, there's a sort of ecosystem of documents, and it's just based on what's the clearest way to convey something. Sometimes it will be an Excel sheet, sometimes it'll be a presentation, sometimes it'll be a Miro board, you know, for artists, but depending on who you're talking to, the method would change. And I would say as well, it's been very organic, and it continues to evolve. That if we find a better way to do something and a better way to engage with a department, then we'll change. And so I'd say when thinking about, okay, I want to go work somewhere, oh God, what should I know? What you should do is, again, sorry, I'm going to keep saying it, but it's more about your mindset. And when you get somewhere, always be thinking, what's the other person need from us? Is there a better way to do this? Or what does the person need from us? Is there a reason why we do it this way? So that you can then understand what they need from that document or whatever. But yeah, it'll literally be any form of communication that will come together to make sure that we get what we want is what we use. How about you, Kike? Sorry.
I actually have nothing to add. I think it's quite funny because we're also using Google Docs, and for some reason I kind of had this idea that there was some kind of high-tech, state-of-the-art narrative technology that perhaps the bigger companies were using, but it's quite nice to know that Google Docs, spreadsheets, and basically everything we're doing now is working. And I'm totally like, I stand behind Miro too. Our art director kind of introduced it, but it's really been a godsend. It's really, really, really good.
What we find as well is when you're collaborating, we do Zoom outlining sessions, and we'll collaborate on a Google Doc. But the best meetings have been on Miro as well. I think it's very tactile, and you know, everyone can sort of pile in and put stuff on or whatever. So that's been a real benefit, I guess, if you want to say anything about the panorama, is learning a really amazing way to work together collaboratively in this software that I don't know that we would have used otherwise, because, you know, there would probably be a whiteboard and a piece of paper and a pen.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you everyone for the questions that are coming in. I'm going to try and work some of these into the questions I'm asking, and then I will be moving straight on to just the ones that are coming in as well. So please do keep those coming. Yeah, so I think a mixture of central docs, because we're communicating with a wide range of different people. For anyone playing the narrative drinking game, waiting for the word Excel to come up, I think somebody's already got a few drinks in tonight. And somebody, we've had a question about why Excel that came in one project that I've been working on, that I've worked on recently, had over 50 columns of information in it. So the line of dialogue was one piece of information sitting in amongst all of the other bits and pieces that were there, with the file names, the referencing to go off to voiceover, the line directions, so trying to keep track of that in a Word document, no. Whereas at least a big spreadsheet, you can open up what you need at that moment, or just hide them. But there's sometimes there can be huge amounts of information that are attached, which is why Excel is used. I'm just finding reasons to keep saying Excel for the people that said they were doing the narrative games. Thank you, great, thanks for that. So we've been talking about process, but if somebody is sort of starting off, or they're working on their own game and they have to implement it themselves, how can they? What do they need to be looking out for when they're working as a writer on their own? What are the pitfalls or benefits from implementing your own work? Is that something that you've done yourselves? Is it something that you've come across?
I personally have. I mean, when I was kind of trying to figure things out, I made my own game. I think one thing, I mean, I don't have so many points to make, but the one thing that I thought was quite useful was to actually let other people experience the game that you've made, because obviously in your head, I mean, we've kind of mentioned this before. I mean, I don't know who, but it's been mentioned that you kind of have sometimes an idea in your head of how something would flow, or the choices people would make, or whether they would understand what you've written. But yeah, I mean, when someone actually plays it, you might find that there are discrepancies with what you had in mind. So I think it's really, really nice to allow as many people as possible to play what you create and give you feedback, and yeah, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that as well. Setting yourself a deadline, I think, or kind of a contained sort of goal, because it's so easy when it's just you and you're the only one that's like going to get impacted by how many choices and branches, and the character can go over here, but they can all explore over there. Very easy to get lost. I've definitely been there. So yeah, giving yourself a bit of a deadline and trying to contain your kind of creativity again, as was said before, creative limitations, giving yourself that is really helpful.
Yeah, I'd say I've been very fortunate that I would always need other. I just love working with other people, so would always need that. So I've always had that. But I would say if one's doing it on one's own, is to just seek out some form of group or some form of support system that you can create. And then, you know, if there's a meetup, for example, use that as your deadline to just get something down, because I think that's the biggest thing as writers, is you're just like, no, it's not perfect yet, no, and yet you really need to, like, editors are the best thing ever. Like, you do need somebody to like come in and be like, is this piece of writing self-indulgent? I know it took you hours to work out how this piece of logic would work, but actually it does not affect the gameplay whatsoever. I think that it's just playtesting it. It's just getting another voice in that you trust, and to see, is what I'm trying to say, the experience I'm trying to create here, is that landing? You just need another human being. So I think the question was like, how does one go about that if you're on your own? It's absolutely implement it yourself, but really try to reach out and create a community for yourself so that you can get feedback from other people. And I think now more than ever, it's more accessible to be able to do that and share stuff.
I actually just want to add 2 points. Like, so on Leah's point of trying to find a community, I think it's the game jams. A lot of them are online. So if you are kind of thinking about a specific group for that, maybe check for game jams in your area. I mean, actually, well, we're all pretty much inside and online right now, so you can probably find one that's in your time zone at least. And then also, to kind of branch off of Frankie's point, it sometimes is nice to have kind of a framework of the story that you're trying to write. So the bare bones, like what's going to happen, the main points, so that you can kind of not get overwhelmed and spiral infinitely into a story where, just a rabbit hole, basically. And it kind of also helps with the timing. So just wanted to add those 2 things.
Running away, please. Thank you. Great. And I just a bit off screen then, because I think lots of people just sort of felt called out then by your comment and Leah about get it on the page. It doesn't have to be perfect. Someone's going, I don't recognise that in me at all. No.
Listen,
no.
I'm talking to myself. When Kike was just saying, like, give yourself a thingy, I think it's just writers and creatives generally. I'm so impressed by people who are like, it's out, because then you can make it better. But if you don't get it down in a way that is complete, firstly, there is such a huge amount of momentum one gets from finishing something, even if it's terrible. Finishing something, you're like, oh, that feels good, and you do it again and again. Whereas it makes, conversely, you feel awful letting things drag on for ages. Again, talking to myself and about myself. So anything that you can do to like just get something out the door, and have someone who you can be accountable to. Like again, like for me, I just, real people are necessary. It's not a fun, you know, idea for me that the laboring writer in isolation, you know, with a, I don't know, what's his name, Hemingway, with like a bourbon and a whatever. No, for me, it's very much about like, any creative work is about engaging with an audience. So you need people, so that you don't become too self-indulgent or never finishing the sentence. I will stop now.
And would you say that's true of implementation as well as the writing process? Do you need to get it out there? Do you need to get on with it? Or is it more of an analytical and scientific approach where it has to be done? Or do you need to just, no, get it in the game and see if it works?
I think the same principle applies, to be honest. Like
similar. Sorry, continue.
No, please, please continue.
I was going to say similar, but actually one thing I was going to say, I forgot to say earlier, is with implementation, you really have to pay such close attention to detail, because you don't want something not to work because, you know, you forgot to link something to something else. You want it not to work because the logic doesn't work, because the script needs to be changed. So you do have to be quite clean and detailed with what you do and quite focused. So I think it works two different parts of your brain, but I think one, as someone implementing, the two things you want to do are be as I say, clean as possible, make sure every single thing that you've done is as you found it in the script, and then elevate it, you know, with your creativity. But I think it's a slight narrative well, certainly in our company, Frankie, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the luxury of being like, let's see if this works, and then it gets cut, as opposed to you can't really sort of slapping paint on your canvas as an implementer. You're much more detail oriented than that.
Yeah, there's that fictional love of the wedding story where everybody panics on the day of the wedding. I mean, I didn't do that. I was in love and I wanted to get married, but you know, all of that sort of pressure that builds up on that day, you get several times a day working in games when you get that thing from Perforce or something else. So, do you want to commit? It's like, when I press this, it's going to go in the bill. Do I want to commit? Do I really want to? So yeah, I didn't feel those no's on my wedding, but I feel every time that message comes up on the, do you really want to commit? Do you? With that, yeah, the terrifying thing of putting it, you know, with code. So one question that's come in is implementation? Is it one thing, or is there a big difference in processes between, say, implementing writing for cinematics or barks or level dialogue? Are you having to approach each of those in a different way, or is it just the same sort of logic, or does everything have to be approached with its own particular respect and code? I'm going to go for all the easy ones and just leave it.
I think it probably has to. I feel like every element that you're bringing into the game kind of has a similar kind of respect that you have to bring to it. That is kind of, if you're, everything from bringing the narrative into the game, thinking about the audio that you bring into the game, thinking about the art that you bring into the game. I don't know if this answers the question, but truly, I think everything. That's why you have separate departments for everything. It doesn't all live under, you know, one person in a kind of a game company. Sometimes it does, and that's fine. If that's how it works in certain places, that's how it works. But in kind of, when you're making kind of a big game, you've got certain people doing certain things, and they're kind of putting the time into those certain things.
I think you touched on it earlier when you were talking about John doing the audio as opposed to the audio department, that each company does things in their own specific way. Each game, I think, is the same, even within the same company. Certainly with us, that we have different products that have a completely different way of firstly being written. let alone being implemented. So one needs to then figure out, okay, well, why do we do it this way? Because there's different mechanics and whatever. So I feel like it's the approach is the same, in that pay attention to detail, communicate with people to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, be as creative as you can once you understand what your limitations are because you communicated well. But then each time, and I think that's possibly the joy of it as well, is you'll learn and get really in depth into a project and into a specific task that you're doing. But when you move on to the next one, you'll just take, you'll learn more, you'll learn again, because it'll be a different process for those specific reasons.
Yeah, and you kind of learn your strengths as well. You kind of learn sort of what parts of the game that you should be, you know, responsible for, and yeah.
So with if we were talking about film or television, then the pacing of a story can be passed on somewhat through the page, and the same for theatre. Some theatre writers flood their scripts with stage directions as much to tell the director, slow it down for this bit, while others divest, themselves entirely and just throw words at the page and let the director find their own rhythm and pace with it. With film, it goes over to the director, and the actor will work with it, but then the editor has a lot of control over how the pacing goes. Does a lot of that then, in an interactive world, that sort of skill set of determining the pace and the flow of the script, it appears on the page, but when it goes into the game, is it in the hands of the implementer? And what are the sort of things that you can do create or play with within those sort of realms of implementation? What is it that you're bringing to the script through that process?
I think I don't know if I'm going to be answering this question correctly, but I mean, I think, with a lot of film and kind of passive media, you're kind of told this show don't tell kind of thing, where you can imply a lot, but because you have control over everything in some way, right, as the director or the person writing the script. But I guess with game writing, you're kind of dancing to the beat of the player, right? So I think you kind of need to change your approach in some way and be more of a tell, don't show. I mean, you can find obviously creative ways to do that, but I think the script flips quite a bit in that sense. So yeah. That's the only thing that I had in my brain at that moment in time. But yeah, just finding like really creative ways. So when someone interacts with something or goes somewhere, like ways to actually just tell them the information that you need to tell them, whether it's that they need to jump somewhere or use a certain item, this kind of thing. Did anyone else want to add?
Yeah, no, I want to add, but I feel like I talk a lot, so which I guess is good for a panel where people are talking. But one wants to moderate it. I would say with pacing, I did actually, in my Long and Winding Road, I was an editor for a time, and which is where I learned how much I love writing, because you realize there's so much you can do when you reveal a piece of information will determine the pacing. And I think what carried over to that in terms of our interactive fiction is you can't, like, so for our game you tap your phone, or if it's a console game you'll be making moves or whatever. You can't know the speed with which the player will do that, but what you can do is know when you'll have the consequence to a choice, or when you'll give them a choice. And generally, like if there's a point at which the player needs to interact, that they slow down because they have to choose something. And then the next time you give them a choice, you can pace how long that will be. Then so that's on the writing side. You can figure out when to remind the player that they're in the world and when to just be giving them the world. With the pacing, when you're in implementation though, yeah, I mean, our department does cutscenes. They will layer certain music or sound effects under it to try to get a sense of time passing or how they want it to be. And sometimes they'll take, you know, our descriptive text and they'll break that up as well, because they're slowly getting a sense of how it feels when you have like a block of text or when you break it up. What does that do if you need to like wait to see and then you know the next thing. So there are various things, but who controls the pacing? I think it's a dance, I guess, between the writers, the implementers, and then fundamentally the person playing the game. They're the final element. Because yeah, one can't you won't know how people play.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm always trying to keep in mind as well, is that you don't know if somebody's just put down the phone or put down the console and then they just turned it on and then they're like, oh, but what's going on now? Kind of just giving those little like reminders. It's just something that I think really helps when you're writing or implementing, ways to kind of cue to what they've already experienced. We see it in, you know, recaps in the beginning of an episode of Netflix. That's kind of what a game has to do all the time. So yeah, it is a bit of a dance to get that right.
Just thinking, sort of finished the panel. How was the panel last night? It was terrible. You know, the panelists came along and they kept talking and sharing all of their wisdom and answering the questions properly. Just like, stop doing that. You know, it's like, that's not what people come along for. They want those long silences rather than you sharing all of your thoughts and insight. Please do keep going. It's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredibly gendered to apologize for talking. So I apologize for even like engaging with the stereotype of women being like, I'm so sorry, did I talk? Anyway, let's move. Let's do this. Ask questions. I'm ready.
One question that's come up a couple of times, I'm just going to answer this one very quickly myself, which is, can we post some examples on screen? We can't at the moment. A mixture of things to do with NDAs and also the fact that one of the things the games industry definitely doesn't do is any form of standardization. So if you get one script, it's useful, but also whenever you go to another place, it's going to be like, we don't do it that way. The Writers Guild is looking into the possibility of doing a script library moving forward. I mention that quietly because we haven't started work on that, because we've been working on the guidelines instead. So don't think, great, it'll be out tomorrow. We're going to look at trying to get around some of those questions and issues so we can put some variety of script library online in the future. So watch this space, but we can't post anything right now. But thank you for asking that, and we will try and provide that when we can. Do you think writers should be committed? Well, that really depends on what you mean by committed. Does anyone have experience working with voice actors, and does that change the writing and implementation?
Interestingly, so freelance that I'm working on at the moment, I'm working with a company called IO Audio, and I'm writing voice acting reels. So little tiny little scripts for and they have to obviously be made up characters, because we don't want to copyright anyone, and so of characters, and yeah, I'd say it does make it a little different, because you're writing these words to be projected and to be acted, rather than to be read. So you've got to they've got to be a little bit snappier, and they've also got to sort of convey a different kind of level of storytelling. They kind of come across in maybe a bit more expressive. Maybe they're a little bit less nuanced onto kind of what they can kind of achieve, especially in voice acting reels, which are literally like 4 lines long. So yeah, my personal experience have definitely said that there's definitely a difference, but both are great fun.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I keep asking you this, but could you just repeat the question?
Is there a difference between implementing text when it's text, or text when it's spoken and performed by voice actors? Are there different implementation challenges involved?
I'm not sure about the implementation, but certainly in the writing of it, as Frankie said, the challenge is one is probably slightly more economical when you know it's going to be read, because there's something what we'll try to convey character in word choice and cadence and whatever, and you need more of it when you're just reading text.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it's a voice actor, you need to leave them room to infuse the script with character. So I think always, well, certainly when I'm editing our narrative designers and our writers, I'm always like, economy, cut. But that would be even more the case when it's for voice actors, because you just want to make sure you leave room for them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And every line is more studio time as well, because every line costs.
Oh god.
Which is not the funnest thing to think about, but also another element of being resourceful. So yeah.
Per line, did you say? Per line?
No, they don't, but it's just kind of studio time.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I was like, what? I haven't worked with voice actors.
No, yeah, just the time spent in the studio. The longer your script is, the longer it takes for the story to get told, the longer it's going to take.
And then,
project.
Aside from a production point of view, if you also put yourself in the position of the player, like, I think there is an element to which you're like, oh, I want to hear from the characters, I want to know what's going on in this world, but then there's a point at which you're like, wait, I'm the main character, I'm the star of the show, like I don't really want to hear too much before I can engage or do stuff or whatever. So it's also, aside from leaving room for the voice actors, it's also just being sensitive to, like, if I give this person a huge, great big chunk of text, how will potentially the player feel about that, and how will the voice actor be able to do what we're always doing in anything that we create in the game, which is hold the player's attention, get them to be like, oh, I want to know what happens next. You take that away when it's just like super self-indulgent purple prose. So yeah.
On the technical side of things, testing, how do you go about testing? You've talked about the need to double check before putting it in and making sure that all the logic's there, but how do you set about testing the implementation and tracking down and handling bugs?
And to Frankie. Have a quality assurance team. Have a QA team. That's their speciality, to test the game, make sure it's working. They do a fantastic job. And support your QA team, because they're brilliant and they make your game work.
Like they're the best. And if you have like our QA team is so amazing, because they're not just checking does it work, as in can we break this. They're also being like, we see what you're trying to do here with this piece of dialogue or this choice or whatever, but we didn't feel it. So almost like a focus group of players, because they love the game too. When it comes to testing, I think it's like anything that you make, you really need other people to validate it and to like try and break it and stuff. If you don't have access to a QA team, just get people to play it. Just give people pizza or delivery vouchers.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about about script software and mapping software for generation. Are there any technical elements that do you need to know Unity? Should you know Unity? Are there any other bits and pieces when it comes to implementation that you could or should be looking at getting familiar with?
I don't think it's necessary that you have to know it, but you have to be aware and mindful and be able to so I did do a little moment, a brief period, if you will, of kind of doing the implementations into the Unity software that we had, and just kind of knowing sort of what impact the narrative has kind of on that, and how much time will be spent on this like lovely little branching dialogue where you've got someone to get a different drink, and every different drink leads to a different type of story that you get. Yeah, it makes you, I know I keep saying the word resourceful, but it does really make you kind of realize the sort of the impact of your story. So whilst, you know, it's not everybody's skill set, just having an idea of the impact of your story is a really good thing, and it's definitely something you can kind of gather from having a look at what people's work on Unity.
Yeah, I mean, because this is the Writers Guild as the panel, I assume most people are writers, want to tell stories, and implementation is sometimes what one will do as a narrative designer. Like, it'll be a huge part of what you do, sometimes it won't be. So it's more an awareness. So it doesn't require that you know a specific piece of software or whatever. I'm repeating what Frankie says now. Just all you need to be aware of is the impact that you have. I will say that it is like Unity Hub, like you can download Unity. I think if you've got like an iMac, it'd probably be a strong enough computer. Although I think it's relatively low on needing power, but point being, you can download it, and there are loads of tutorials and like hands-on things that you can do to understand. Like, for example, visual scripting is really fun to do, just to visually understand, oh, that text means this and this means that and whatever. So that it's a bit like maybe a step up from Twine, and then you can know what implementers are doing with your script when they are putting it into a piece of software like that. But I would say, I think it's really important to reiterate again, with this being, as I say, a Writers Guild talk as opposed to like a game talk, is to be intimidated by the idea of software or feeling like you have to have achieved this or done this or whatever. You really don't. You can absolutely learn it. And so yeah, don't let that be a barrier.
And one last question, because we're running a little bit late because we started a bit late. My apologies for that and the issues with the link. But we had the question through. Thank you for all of the questions. Some of the questions were quite general and didn't point directly to implementation. So for some of those about getting into games or how you approach scripts or the difference between TV and games, I will point you to the other panels that we've had across this week and in the previous festival. So we've got 6 games related panels that are up already. There'll be another 5 with this week that are going up, including everything from getting into and staying in games, narrative design, etc. So for some of the questions, I would go to those. But one that's coming about the sort of getting into its side, but just looking specifically at the narrative design and the implementation. What advice would you give to somebody who's transitioning into this area, either from a writing side or a programming side? What are the best of approaches for them to take should they wish to enter this exciting area of game development?
I mean, I guess maybe because I'm the freshest, I could answer this. Just in general, like getting into that industry or the implementation specifically?
Specifically, sort of looking at the implementation side of things.
Oh, okay. I mean, I suppose it's sort of the same as when you're trying to get in overall, just speaking to other people, trying to learn as much as you can. Well, people with that experience already. There's quite a few articles and YouTube videos and things that can sort of aid you in that transition. So yeah, I would say that just I guess using the keyword of being resourceful and actually just going out there and seeing what you can find. That's the approach that I would advise, and that's the one that I took myself when trying to move into this industry.
Yeah, definitely. And don't be daunted by it.
Yeah, this too.
Yeah, I think that would be my thing as well, is just to really be resilient, be resourceful, as has been said multiple times, but in many ways be resourceful in how you find opportunities for experience, be resourceful in the way that you will try and fix and solve problems that you encounter within a game and, you know, implementation environment, and also within like a personal one. And yeah, like, don't be intimidated, but definitely, like, and don't see humility as a weakness. Don't see asking for help as a weakness. I think as an industry, the gaming industry is very it's got a lot of gatekeepers. It's very hermetically sealed, it seems at times, that if you don't, you know, understand certain acronyms or look a certain way or like a certain thing, that you're not in. There are loads of people who don't feel that way, so gravitate towards them and ask them questions, and know that it's a process, it's a journey. There's so much to learn, so much to do. You don't have to be perfect straight away, but just keep just be resilient, be resourceful, keep going.
You don't have to be perfect straight away, and several decades into the industry, you don't necessarily have to achieve it at any stage, because you just keep learning all of the things that you don't know, and that's what this week has been about as much as anything else. Because I know, as a positive thing from this panel and from the other ones, that I'm coming out with as many questions as answers, because there have been many doors opened to go and look through and explore, and to look for the next set of answers, or to as you were sort of alluding to the day before, to go and find the next model of things, or how things can be done, which is a really lovely aspirational way, I hope, that to finish the panel tonight, because believe it or not, we have zipped through the time. I did tell you it would go quickly. So as we've come to the end of this, we've come to the end of the fifth panel of the second Writers Guild of Great Britain festivals. I would just like to take this moment to just pass on this information just quickly. If you would like to join the Writers Guild, you can find the information there. We've got all sorts of different levels of membership, from candidate membership, student membership, through to full membership, so you can find the one that's right for you, and they come with different benefits. I would like to thank very much the Writers Guild for hosting and organising the events, and my wonderful co-chair Samantha Webb and the Video Games Committee for all of the work that they've done. Thank you to our sponsors, R2C, who have done a cracking job supporting us with the festival, and I hope you had a chance to check out their Twitch channel yesterday. If not, I know they are looking to put that session online as well, and we'll pass on details of that. I would also like to thank, of course, our wonderful panelists, who I'm going to put up the contact details. People asked for the contact details. Those are for Twitter, with the exception of Leah, who's on Insta. So you can find the contact details there. So you can follow people and continue to engage with the narrative community, because, as I said, in the main, we're a very positive and supportive bunch. Be polite, be there for each other, and learn a little more. So although we can't hear you, we will feel it through the ether of the universe. So please, can you give a round of applause, some cheers, general fanfares to our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much for coming along this week, and we hope to encounter you on another occasion. Thank you very much.